let me fill you guys in a little bit. First of all, I've been doing this business since I was age 15, working with my dad. I started young, really enjoyed it, got a liking to it, and been doing it ever since. So I did a lot of construction work in my earlier years, and then I had an opportunity to get back into this because there was only one other competitor in Sioux Falls, and I got called to see if I wanted to start doing it again, and I decided I would go ahead and do it. So from that point on, everything has just taken off. So that's a little bit of background on me. What I'm going to do is go through these houses that we've worked on. Some of you might know the house and who the people are that live in it, but this house here is Judge Gene Keene's, and if you notice the steps, we draw attention to the steps there. Those steps are really rough shape. They were just totally falling apart. And he had a lot of brick that was just disintegrated. And luckily enough, I had some at my warehouse. I try to keep as many of these as we can. If I have somebody that's tearing down a house or something, I ask them if we can get those brick. And luckily enough, we have. And then, of course, this year we did a job over at the VA, and they're very meticulous on the color of the brick and everything. And fortunately, we matched the brick. You know, it was a blend, and I ended up getting a lot more. So I got plenty of those at my warehouse now. So I was just so thankful, you know, to be able to get some of this color here. So, but anyway. Back to the step here. Gene's steps was pretty well shot. Those brick were literally falling out on the first and second step there. So we just totally rebuilt that, did a total tuck point on it, cut all the joints out, and made that look just the way it is right now. And then you'll notice, let me see if I can make this pointer work here. There we go. Notice on this sidewalk right here, and then it wraps up and goes over to this step here. What we did is up on top here, there's kind of like a little sidewalk that goes across here all the way down to here. We ended up, there's a bunch of brick that was really bad, cracked and chipped and everything. Gene wanted those replaced, and luckily enough, Gene had those in his backyard by his shed. So they were dirty and everything, but we got to use them, and he was so happy. And then I did have some at my warehouse and everything too, so we did have to put some more, but we lucked out and made him very happy. And then his front step up here, that was pretty rough shape also. Not near as bad as this one here, but we made that look really nice, and he's very happy. Now he's got one around the side right about there. He's going to have me do here in the near future. But it turned out really great. He really made him happy. So, and I enjoy seeing stuff like this, you know, when you come and look at it and see how bad it is, and just knowing what I can do, you know, to restore it and make it look good. So I enjoy doing stuff like that. But this was Gene Keene's place here. Let's go to the next one here. Okay, this was Bird's house on 6th and I think is it some, or Duluth, I think is what it is. Doug Bird's house, I think it was. Years ago, we did the tuck pointing on the foundation there, and that, notice, is on the bottom there. It's got a quartzite foundation and stuff, and let me find that. There we go. Now I'll point to it here. Right here, this foundation right here, that was pretty rough shape, as it was on Laura and Sean's house too. What we did is we cut out those mortar joints there, and a lot of times years ago, these people would I'm not pointing a finger at Birds by any means, but they'd have somebody come by, a mason or something, and they would just patch it, putting a flat joint on it, and not putting the beaded joint back onto it like it was originally supposed to be. So I like doing that, restoring it back to its original condition. So they were very happy. We cut those all out, chipped it all out, and then put the mortar back in with a beaded joint. And back then, they either used a red mortar color or they left it natural. So we tried to match it as best we could and make a nice looking mortar joint out of it for a beaded joint. So now I noticed this chimney here, this was done years and years ago, and I noticed from the picture that up on the top you got a couple of brick that looked like they got moved here for some reason. I don't know what happened, but that chimney was repaired many, many years ago. I think back in the 80s, I think is what it was. So I think it's probably about time it might need some more. So, and they're probably well aware of it. But that was Bird's house. Do they still live there?
They do. Why did they do the beading with the foundation stone back then?
It's funny. I don't know why they did. I think it was just for architectural look. Is what I'm assuming. Because flat, it doesn't look very nice. With that bead on there, it really looks nice. I'm currently doing a house down in Canton, foundation, and that house there has some flat joints on it too. And I had told Amber, I said, I'll really make that look nice by putting a beaded joint, and she's all for it. Well, I got the front done, and she's just amazed by it, so she really likes it. So she said, just continue on. So we're doing the back of the house now too. But anyway, it's for looks mostly. The flat look just doesn't look good. So, okay, we'll move on here. Okay, I think this one here is Kathy and Darla's Hofers, and what we did on this one here is that step was the same as Gene Keene's, and it doesn't work taking snow blowers up it by any means. And Kathy kind of chuckled about it. She told me that Darla's took a snowblower up it, and chipped a bunch of them, but it was kind of funny listening to her, but that whole step there was all totally rebuilt. And then this one here, she was kind of really meticulous on. She didn't want this one really torn up too much to put it back to, new-like condition, so she had us leave some of the chipped brick in this area here, left it alone for the authenticity of it. So we didn't do too much with that. Now the other thing is on this house here, we also did some tuck pointing around the foundation, the perimeter of the house, and the chimney on this house also was done. It's right up about there. So it was funny because when we started putting the mortar back into it, we got the color off a little bit. So she called me. And she said, Gene, that color's wrong. It looks terrible. I said, don't worry about it. We'll cut it all out and redo it for you. But it was funny. She was happy, that I was willing to go ahead and cut out the mortar and redo it. But made her happy. But we used a mortar. It was a mortar color called root beer. So it blended in pretty good. So anyway, and then on Hofer's house also, what we did. By the way, there's the chimney right there that we did. So on Hofer's house, the coal chute bin in their basement years ago, Kathy called me and she said, Gene, can you sandblast? And I said, yeah, I certainly can. And she asked me if I would come over and do her coal bin. I said, what? Coal bin? So I went over, looked at it, and said, yeah, we can go ahead and get your coal bin sandblast. And I said, it's a dirty mess. I said, we're going to have to block everything off, plug your vents in your house. I said, just beware, you're going to have a big mess. Well, we contained it pretty good. And we ended up sandblasting it, and she was very meticulous. We couldn't do a real good job on it because she wanted the authenticity left, on the walls. So we did, but and Sean, I was just talking to him briefly. He said he went in there, and it looks pretty sharp. I've seen it after the fact there, but that is just beautiful, isn't it, Sean? Their wine room. It's a controlled environment. So, but we also did that for Hofers there. So we'll move on here. Oh, I wonder whose house this is, huh? Lauren Sean Rohde's house. This one here really needed a tuck pointing job, really bad on it. And you'll notice the granite down below here. See, that's a beaded joint there. And a beaded joint comes out. And a lot of that was gone, and some of it was flat, if I remember right, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a lot of repair done over the years on it. But anyway, we sawed every one of these joints out on this whole entire house, all the way around this house, didn't we?
Yes.
And we didn't do too bad of a mess, did we, for dust inside?
You guys did it really fast.
Yeah, we did good, so I'm pretty happy with it. And I didn't get your house too dusty, did I?
No.
Okay. I warned you though, didn't I? That it was going to be dusty, but we sawed every one of those joints out and tuck pointed them back in, and it was just 2 of us on it. So that did it, and I don't remember how long it took. Do you?
No. Do you want to talk a little, like, something, the reason we hired you is because of the Deadwood, The reason we hired you is because when we were applying for the Deadwood grant, you took the time to help answer all the questions.
Oh, yeah,
And
good point. Yeah.
do you want to talk a little bit about, I don't know if the mortar you use for historic buildings is different than the mortar you use for non-historic buildings?
No.
But okay.
No, good point, Laura. Yeah, when she called me and stuff, she asked me to bid it and stuff, and of course, they went through the bidding process too, had other bidders on it. And luckily enough, we got the bid for it. And to my knowledge, we weren't the cheapest, I guess, on it, yeah, but we got it. But anyway, it turned out really good. Made you happy, made me happy, so that we made a nice looking house like that come back to life again. So, and your other question was, Laura, as far as the mortar. No, the mortar, we use what we call spec mix. It's all blended, through a machine process, and we get it over by Concrete Materials off of Rice Street. So it's a spec mix, and that way you don't get the mixes off. The only thing we got to do is add our color, and I got a formula for that. Each house is different. Once I get the mix done, because I'll waste a bag of mortar when I do it. But this one here I didn't have to because yours was natural. But if I add color, what I usually do is do a test at my shop. We'll add the color to it, and we'll dry it, and we'll see if that matches. So we've been pretty fortunate. So speaking of that, VA again, that one there, trying to match that, and as old as those buildings were, we ended up pulling it off. We matched it to a T. So, and the VA is tough to work for, and the project manager that I was working with was very good with us. He complimented us and told us how nice of a job we did, and he was very impressed with the color that we got. He says, you can't even see it, and it's true. We played around with the color and we pulled it off, but not always does it work that easy though, by any means. So we do have some problem once in a while with the color mixes. So, but anyway, as far as the masonry, it's all special mixed. So anybody got any questions so far? Sean?
Was that the root beer? Was that the root beer mix on ours?
No, yours was just a natural, no color at all. Hofer's was the root beer, and root beer is kind of a brown. So, and I learned something new too this year at the VA. My competitors, we're all close together. He showed me a different technique. My dad taught me the way to mix it that I'm so used to, but I learned a new technique, and what we do is, well, let me go back up here. Look, the old technique is what we did is we dump our mortar into the mixer, and then we take the powder. It's all measured in cups. We use measuring cups, and we'll take that powder and dump into the mixer, but that powder gets all over the paddles and everything, so it doesn't all get blended in, like it should, but we get a good color. He showed me to take that color, same color, we'll take a gallon of water, mix it up, stir it up and then add that to our mix first, and that's why I think we were so successful on the BA. So and here, my dad, just to show you, my dad was an older guy teaching a younger guy, and I learned from a younger guy on this mix, so it was pretty neat. So in fact, he's just stopped over to my house just a few minutes before I came down here. So we're all good friends. So any other questions?
I have a comment and I have a question. My first comment is on the beaded joint. Just made me think of, it seems like with historic houses, it's all about texture and detail, and that's what makes them come alive. So I thought that was a good point, because
Right.
I think, if you take away the original windows, put in vinyl windows, put on vinyl siding, remortar without the bead joint, just one little thing, one little change at a time that doesn't seem like a big deal.
But it adds up, though.
It adds up.
Yeah.
And so I think that extra detail of the beaded joint is just one of many examples of how, if you're going to treat an old house right and make it look right,
Yep.
you have to have the texture and the dimension. So my question is, we have a house we had retuck pointed a few years ago. We just moved into the house about a year ago, and I've learned so much since I moved in, and there's some things I wish I'd done differently. Our foundation's quartzite. It was already painted, and the paint was peeling off. And we repainted it because we didn't even think about sandblasting the paint off. And so I'm thinking the answer to my question is that it's too late, and if I sandblasted the paint off, I would need to retuck point it again. Is that true?
You know what? Good question, everything. If you get a good sandblaster and stuff, he might be able to make it work. And Mulder and Sons over in Hartford, they're pretty good about it. And not only do you have to, they got different methods of sandblasting. They can use walnut chips, they use glass, baking soda. Baking soda works really good for sandblasting, but if you're interested in getting that paint off and stuff, I'd contact Mulder and Sons, because there's so many things they use, nowadays. Baking soda I know is real good.
Okay, so it wouldn't necessarily take out the new mortar.
I'm not going to say it's not gonna. It kind of depends on how good the tuck pointing job was, before.
Sure.
So, and then
Okay.
again, it depends on the sandblaster too. So
Yeah.
there's so many what ifs. So
Right.
the only thing you can do is try it. If it damages it, what's more important, getting the paint off, and then probably having somebody come over and tuck point it. You can give us a call on
Okay.
it. So, but I would go for it. There's different ways of trying to attack it. You can use chemicals too, but that's so time consuming. If you're trying to get the paint off,
Right.
it's very time consuming. But I'd recommend trying to get it off with a sandblasting technique of some sort. So,
Okay.
and they can advise you on that.
All right, so it's maybe not hopeless.
Not hopeless.
Okay.
No, nothing's hopeless. It's hopeless only if you don't try.
Right,
So.
okay.
Good point, thanks. So.
I have a basement quartzite foundation as well, and it's in great need of tuck pointing. What are the main things you have to keep in mind if you try to do it yourself?
Good point. What you got to do is it's messy if you're going to do it, and Sean's going to attack his too here, he's telling me. So, sure. I don't know how soon, but anyway, what you got to remember is it's very dirty if you do it right. You got to take chipping hammers, either that or else you got to take hammer and chisel, and that's so time consuming trying to do that. Air-fed chipping hammer will go ahead and clean all that loose mortar out, and you should get it back fairly deep, to where it's solid surface again, to get it done. But I'll warn you, it's time consuming and it's dirty. Especially if you use air. You can plastic it off, and take all the proper measures, for it. But it can be done. I would do it. So, you can always clean up the mess. But I'd go ahead and do it. So, did I answer your question?
Yeah, and so doing a thorough job in removing the old stuff, and then in terms of putting in the new mortar, what do you have to keep in mind? Where can you go wrong?
The only thing you can go wrong is by smearing it all over everything. But it's not that hard, to do it. What I would recommend is getting a spec mix. That way you're not off on your mixes and stuff. It's always consistent. And you mix it to a consistency that's not like pancake batter, but a little bit stiffer, And then you got to have the tuck pointing tools to do it. You put your mortar on a hock and stuff, and then you tuck point it in, and you try to follow around that rock as close as you can without getting it all over it. So you got to have the mortar to the right consistency.
Okay.
Is what you have to do. Not too sloppy. Drier is better, a little bit more dry on the drier side. Don't get it real sloppy because it'll run down the wall. But if you need some advice, if you're going to go ahead and tackle it yourself, I'd be more than happy to come over and show you, how to do it. I mean, it doesn't bother me. I can show you guys anytime how to do
Yeah,
it.
maybe we'd set up a time.
Sure, yeah. I'd be happy
That
to.
demonstration, that'd be really, really helpful.
Sure. So, because I know it's expensive to do it, but, if you can do it yourself, more power to you. So, but I'd be happy, when you guys get ready to do it, I'd be happy to show you, so.
Thank you.
Pardon me?
I said, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Any other questions?
Jean does have business cards at the back table, so you can pick those up as well.
Josh, if you don't mind, maybe I'll come over to your place when he goes over to your house, and we get it all done at the same time.
Yeah.
One question I had, Gene, is I've heard that some people use a decorator's cake bag. Have you ever used that before?
Good point, Sean. Yes, I have. It's a little bit bigger. It's a grout bag. We have used that before too. Yeah, and I'd be happy to show you that route too. Yep. So, and that, if you use a grout bag, you don't have to have the mortar is stiff. You can leave it a little bit looser, because what happens when it contacts the old mortar, the old wall, part of the wall, just like the moisture just sucks right out of that masonry, just like that. So, but good point. Yeah. I didn't even think about using that. I use a gun. That drill that we used over at your place. We use that. We used to use the grout bag. So on occasion we'll use a grout bag too. But that works pretty good too. Good point. So.
And just one more, I was actually talking to a guy today who said he did tuck pointing, and he said on a foundation he always starts from the bottom and goes up. Is there any truth to the advantage to starting from one point to the other, or do you do it like layers, or where do you start and where do you?
Well, a good point. On a basement like that, I would probably recommend doing the bottom up, because, it's old and everything, and you don't want to, crumble the basement. I don't know how, chances are it's not going to be that bad, but you don't want to run into an incident like what happened downtown. That definitely went wrong, and, and sorry that you had to have a loss of life, but if I would have done it, I would have handled it different. But, it's done and over with now. But, yeah, good point. But I'd start at the bottom. Shore up everything solid. Take on about 2-3 feet at a time, and then do it.
You didn't let it dry completely, and then before going further up?
I would, yeah. So, definitely. So, yep. So, and I don't think you guys will have a problem. I really don't. Because we did Kane's salmon, Gail? Laura? Yeah, we did Kane's house, and we took it all out, it wasn't that bad. We went back an inch, some places 2 inches, but yeah, we went ahead and tackled it, the whole thing. So it's one of those things you got to check, before you start doing it. If you start cutting into it and the whole thing comes out, then you better think, we got to approach this a little bit different. So, but yeah, I'd be happy to show you guys when you're ready to do that. So, and show you with the grout bag too, because I do have some of those on hand. So,
Thanks.
You betcha. Yeah. Next.
Now, I have an old chimney that is brick, at least is brick from what we can see inside the house, but apparently it's got structural issues, and at some point somebody put some kind of a limestone coating or some kind of a white marshmallow looking thing around the chimney, so there's something on the exterior, on the outside of the chimney to kind of hold it in place, I'm guessing. And my question is, do you know, is there a way that we can get that off and get it back to the original brick and repair the original chimney, or what?
You know, probably if they did that, chances are, I'm just thinking now, that brick was so bad up there, they went ahead and put this material, whatever it was, on it, because the brick was so bad, is what I'm guessing they did. So I may be wrong, but I would recommend if you're gonna do that, you probably have to take the chimney down to the roof line there and have it all rebuilt. So-
Then I have another question then about a historic home in a registered historic neighborhood. If I took the chimney down to the roof line,
Side of the roof?
if I don't have anything else in the house using the chimney, would it be legal for us to just, you know, repair the roof, not have a chimney there anymore? Or would we have to do something with the chimney?
How old a house is it? Is it in the historical district?
It is in the historic
Okay.
district. It's one of the contributing historic structures.
Okay, I would guess that you're probably not gonna be able to tear it all down, you know, to keep its historical
Yeah.
effect to it. You're gonna have to rebuild it, is what I would do. I definitely would. I mean, you know, it might be a little costly project, but I definitely would. And I think if the Historical Society sees that, they're gonna agree with me on it. They're gonna say, you know, let's put it back and try to get it, the brick, the color, as close as we can. You know, we won't be able to match it back, you know, like they got the brick back then. Just not gonna happen, so.
But you have brick in your warehouse, so is this something that your
Okay.
team does?
Okay, what, is the brick red? Is it a red brick?
Well, I assume so, because I can't really see it underneath all that covering.
Okay.
Inside the house, it is painted white.
Okay, does your house have brick on it?
Yeah, it does, and it's a
Okay,
red.
chances are the brick that's on your house matches the chimney.
Okay.
So that's what we'd have to look at, is go with that. You know, try to match that brick as close as we can. We're not gonna get identical, but might get close in color, sometimes texture, but it's getting a little bit tougher, you know, to get it. So Warren Buffett bought a bunch of these brick places too, so it's a little bit tougher now, and he closed some of them down. So it's tougher to get some of those brick. So stuff that
Well,
wasn't selling.
I have another question. A lot of the historic homes have fancy brickwork on the chimney. Now, I
Mhm.
don't know, maybe I do underneath all that coating. I hope so, because if I have to rebuild it, I want it to look really awesome.
Mhm.
Do you do fancy brickwork on chimneys?
I don't, but I have a guy that would do it, a masonry contractor. I work with a couple masonry contractors, so.
And we can also do some research to see if the museum might have any photos of your home
Right.
that would include the chimney before that was covered up, so.
So.
You know, and if there is, then that's probably the direction that the board would go in approving you to rebuild, if that's your choice, but to try to be consistent with what was there originally, so.
Yeah, I would definitely check. You got another question, Becky? Pardon me, pardon me. Just, pardon me. Okay, what?
What's the proportion of sand and cement that you use for your masonry material to repoint a basement wall?
Normally, when I did it the old way, before I started going to spec mix, it was 3 parts of sand to 1 part of masonry is what I'd use. And then I'd spike it with some Portland cement, which got a little bit harder. But now I use spec mix.
You use what?
It's called spec mix, SPEC, and then mix. And you can get that at Schoeneman's, I believe, or better yet, Syverson's. They got Hebron brick right behind it. That's where I get all my spec mix, so.
But if you're using the regular cement and sand combination, it's a 2 to 1?
3 to
in favor
1.
of sand?
3 to 1, yeah.
3 to 1?
Yeah, 3 parts of sand to 1 part of masonry. So a gallon, if you're using gallons to measure, 3 gallons to 1 gallon masonry.
I use the
And,
coffee can and just
and
mix
then I go ahead and spike it with a little bit of Portland. So you can get away from doing that by just getting spec mix. I mean, by the time you go buy the sand,
I
buy-
already have sand and cement.
what's that?
I already have sand and cement.
Oh, you do? Okay, all right. Okay, so just remember 3 parts of sand.
3 to 1.
1 part of masonry. You can go a little bit stronger if you don't have the Portland cement, separately. You can go a little bit stronger on the masonry too. You can go like 1 1/4.
So
So-
like a 2 to 1 instead of 3 to 1.
Well, you still go 3 parts of sand. 3 parts of sand to 1 part of masonry. So, or 1 1/2, being you don't have Portland, okay?
Thank you.
Does that answer? Okay?
What are you using to color your mixes then?
If I heard you right, what do we use to color our mixes? We use, it's a powdered form. It's masonry color. That's what it is. And it comes in a lot of different colors. Again, that you get over at Hebron Brick, and you get a lot of different colors. And if they don't have it in stock, you can order it. They have a whole chart of different colors that you can get. But it's a powder. It's crushed up powder, and you just use a measuring cup, as I mentioned before, and then just mix it according to whatever your color is on your tuck pointing that you're using. So now you might, if you got a darker red, you're going to have to add more color, because we use I think it's 1/3 cup, pretty much general. I do, for 1 gallon of water, and then if I need to make it a little bit redder, I can either add more red or I can go to a darker maroon colored color tint. So there's a lot of different colors. I mean, it's just amazing how many colors there are. Right? But that's what I usually do. So, and as I mentioned earlier too, it's best to mix it with water now. New technique. So that I learned. So does that answer your question? Okay. Okay. Next one.
I was wondering about stucco. I've just had a curiosity about stucco a lot of my life. Seems like certain parts of the country, and even up in Winnipeg, where my sister lives, there's a lot of stucco used, but we don't see it so much here. I know in some of the older homes we do, but I was just wondering in general, why isn't it used more? What would the benefits? I know it's more of a permanent thing, but is it worth the cost?
Good question. There is a lot of stucco houses over in the McKinnon area. I've come across them. Cost effective, I think it probably was. They seem to be a little bit warmer houses, more solid. As far as I know, probably more soundproof too. But yeah, there's a few, quite a few houses over in the McKinnon area that do have stucco. And around the city, I mean, you get around, Phillips Avenue has some down there. We've worked on a few of those.
Newer houses, is that real stucco, the newer homes?
No.
And how do you do stucco? What's the method of?
That method there is usually done by a plastering contractor. I've done some stuccoing years ago, but I won't do it anymore. What you got to do is you got to make sure your wall is good and solid and everything. There isn't any rot behind it. And then you take, it's kind of like roofing paper, and you put that over it. And then there's kind of like I call it chicken wire. They used to use chicken wire, but now they got a different plastering wire that they use, and they nail that to the wall. And then what they do is they use a skim coat, and they probably use the spec mix also, and they skim coat it, to fill in all the voids and everything, and then scratch it. So you got good bond for the next finish part of the stucco. They don't do too much stuccoing anymore, and I think it's because of cost. Now what they do is they do an Ephah system. It's energy efficient finish system, I think, if I recall. And that's where they put this, you see these buildings that have white board on it first. It's kind of like a bead board. They fasten it on, and then they put a skim coat over all the joints and the nails and everything. And then they put a mesh over it, and they skim coat it. And a skim coat is with the back, the base part. And then they come back later and they do their finish system, whichever, color they choose or, and they go over the top of that. And so that's known as the Ephah System. Now, years ago, they used to have a lot of problems with that. Out on the East Coast, they had problems with mold with it. Now, they've come a long ways with it now, and I think they got most of the bugs out of it now. So, but I know there for a while when it first came out, they had some serious problems with it, with mold.
We had quite a few buildings downtown with EFS over it, and most people would recognize, once that's come down, there was some beautiful masonry work underneath it. One of them
Exactly.
is the Boyce Law Firm.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I think over at McKenzie, I mean, all over downtown, there might be one or two buildings left that have
Yeah.
EFA. So it isn't something that we try to promote,
Yeah.
in our historic areas, but
Right.
there is certainly a place for that, like way down
Right.
south of town here.
Sure.
So.
Did they have the mold issue also behind it?
Not that I'm aware of.
Oh.
It could be, because I know that for many of them, they were on for quite a long time. But the
Oh.
fact is that they just covered up. They wanted to modernize, and they covered up,
Some nice
brick,
looking brick,
which,
yeah. Yeah.
hard to believe or understand why. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think it was just
Right.
to modernize.
Right. And years ago too, like some of the buildings downtown, they painted them, painted that beautiful brick. I've seen houses that, beautiful brick they covered. Well, you got to sandblast. When I say sandblast, it's probably either baking soda or whatever, so, but blast it off. You can either do that or take chemicals. Well, chemicals are running down the sidewalk and stuff into our river system. That doesn't fly either anymore. So I don't like using chemicals any more than I have to. So especially paint remover stuff. That stuff's really nasty. It stinks and gets into the water system and everything. It's not good. So, and I don't know if the city has a policy on that anymore with using paint remover, on anything. But I don't like using. I'll just refer, like I did Mulder and Sons, to do the blasting and stuff. That's a lot safer. You can clean it up a lot easier. So, okay. So, any other questions? Okay, we'll move on here. See whose else we got in there. Oh, everybody recognize that building? Excuse me, I want to get a drink here. I'm getting cotton mouth here. Everybody recognize that building? That's the Oddfellows building downtown. I did that years ago when I first started. I was a little more gutsy going up high, but anyway. You'll notice up at the top here, whoa, back up here. You notice right at the top there, it says Oddfellow sign. I think it's 1889 if I remember right on there. We went up and cleaned that sign up, and then we painted that. And then, of course, up here, we had a lot of tuck pointing to do down through here and stuff. And then caulked the windows and everything on this. And that cleaned up pretty good. And I think if I remember right, too, that was way back in the 80s, I think I did this. But I think there was paint on these columns here, if I remember right. And the gal that owned it wanted it taken off. So we used paint remover. Back then, we used paint remover. But we got most of it off, and then we water blasted it. And I like using just plain cold water to water blast. Like I say, I don't like using any more chemicals than I have to. If I can achieve, the looks by just plain cold water blasting or hot water, I like doing it that way. But I have used restoration cleaner, works good too. But I try to achieve cleaning as best I can with just going with cold water. So, but yeah, that was a nice project there too. This is Minerva's. Excuse me. Years ago, that was way back in about the 80s too. We did it. Now since that, every one of those joints we tuck pointed. On the front of it now, I think several years ago, what they did is they put a whole new facade here, but up at the top here, I think on most of this is still original. So, I think this part down here, if I remember, yeah, I know that is. That's all new facade that they put on here. So what they did with if they went around, over the top or what with the brick, I don't know, or if this was an infill, I don't remember. But all that was, every one of those joints, we tuck pointed those. So that was a nice job too. So, whoa, back up here. Uh-oh, what'd they do? Maybe that was the end of the road there, huh?
Hey, Gene,
Yep.
quick question on,
Yeah,
on
question.
the Minervas and like that with the brick. Is there some kind of a sealant that you use on the brick specifically? And also on the quartzite, but, you know, separately, is it the same sealant? What do you recommend for brick versus quartzite?
Good question. And I think if I recall, or if I'm reading you right, you're talking about the clear sealant, the waterproofing? Is that what you're talking about? Okay, all right, because when sealants to me is caulking sealants, but sealer is what you want to know. Sealer, yeah. We can use, and again, we test the sealer. We use one from, forget our name brand guy that we get them from. It's SureClean. There we go. It's pre-mixed at the factory, and you can get this stuff, you know, in gallons and mix it on your own. But I'm back to thinking, you know, I want it to be perfect, you know, and get it from the factory. I know it's going to be perfect. So I order all my waterproofing. It's a milky white substance, but it dries clear. And what we'll do is sometimes we'll do a test to make sure that it doesn't discolor, you know, the brickwork and stuff. And this material that I use doesn't do that. So that's why I've used it for years. But I've used it on school projects and everything. We used it on the VA also. And it sprays on, it's like liquid milk, but it dries clear. Yeah, question?
So you put that over the brick, the brick to protect it from water?
Yeah, it's a water sealant, yep.
Okay.
Yep. We spray, after we're totally done with the restoration project, total clean down and everything. We tuck point it first, and then we clean it down with a cleaner. And then after it dries, then we come back, and providing that you sold the job that way. Then you spray this on us with low pressure sprayers. And what you usually do is you start at the bottom and you work your way up. So you got that overflow, you know, running down the wall, you know, so it doesn't get wasted. So you constantly overflow. So you saturate it and it just soaks in. Red brick is really well known for sucking it in too. So, and sometimes we'll put two coats on.
Does that help the tuck pointing last, or what is the?
Absolutely, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It seals the house or the structure up a lot better.
Okay, so when we decided, well, when we painted our tuck pointing, like I said, the people we had do it did say that that was actually better for the tuck pointing job to have paint on it. Does that do the same thing, or is that crazy?
No,
That's crazy, okay.
I wouldn't cover up a good tuck pointing job with paint.
With paint, I know. Well, I
No.
think it was because it had already been painted
Yeah,
before us, and
yeah,
then we said, well,
yeah.
we're just going to paint it
Uh-huh.
again, you
Yeah,
know, and
yeah.
I think they said that that would actually help
Yeah.
the tuck painting job, but.
What would have been nice when they tuck pointed it had that paint taken off right
They should,
away.
they
Yeah.
probably should have said, hey, you know,
Yeah.
you can't take this off.
Yeah.
But they
So-
didn't, and we just didn't even think of it.
Yeah,
So, okay.
that's what I probably would have approached, you know, if I would have been doing the job. I
Right.
would have said, well, how about if you don't like this paint, we get this off and get it back to its original look.
Right.
You know, and before we tuck point it, because sandblasting definitely does some work.
So if Rachel does decide to do that, like, what kind of protection does she do for the wood of her house? Because sandblasting is so, but I'm sure the sandblaster would tell you.
Right.
Yeah.
They'd cover it up. Again, it depends on what they use. If they use baking soda, you don't have to worry so much, but if they use black diamond, which now they got to use black diamond for sandblasting, because you can't use silica sand because scoliosis or you can't use it. I don't know if they even sell it anymore, but they use black diamond. But that's really got some cutting power to it. But Your sandblaster, he would definitely take the appropriate measures, I would hope, to cover up the wood, you know, with a piece of plywood or something, you know, some remnant pieces of thin plywood, so you don't damage it. It's the way I would approach it. So, might be, if you're gonna do that, you know, if he doesn't wanna cover it, and, which I'm sure he will, just suggest, you know, I don't want the wood damage, you know, can you protect it before you do it? And then have him do a test run at it too, if he can, see if it comes off. So, next one, next question. Oh, that's fine, you can bring as many more as you want, I don't.
So the sealer that you use for the brick, you know, it's for the tuck pointing. Does it work on the brick and stone?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so
most-
it's the
sure.
same sealer for
Yep,
everything?
yeah.
It's about the tuck pointing, not really the thing that you're tuck pointing?
Right. The waterproofing won't suck into the quartzite. Quartzite won't take any waterproofing. It'll just continuously run down.
Okay.
Brick will. Brick will take it. Some of the brick will. It depends if it's got a glaze on it and stuff. But yes, your question is, if I hear you right, can we use the same waterproofing on the brick as we do the quartzite? Yes, because what we want is on the quartzite tuck pointing, we want that sealed up. So we definitely would waterproof that also.
Okay.
You know, so does that answer your question there?
Yeah, it does,
Okay,
thank
so,
you. And
yeah,
then
we
the
can use-
second question,
Okay.
do we need to provide a sealer periodically, or is once right after a fresh tuck point going to do it until the next time you need to tuck point in 25 or 30 years?
That's another good question. Waterproofing is normally good between 5 and 10 years. So you should, if you're going to go ahead and maintain it, between 5 and 10 years. So, yep. So, any other questions? Right behind you. Right behind you, Kathy.
Why doesn't mortar last longer?
Good question. I don't know. Why don't our bodies? I don't know. You know, good question too. I think a reasonable answer to that is because the elements of the weather we're subject to. South Dakota here, we got 4 seasons. We go from plus or minus 40 to 40 below, and we get up to 90. So we're dealing with 140 degrees variance, you know, either way. And that's probably why it's not lasting like it should. But you know what, really, it lasts. It really is lasting, you know, for a long period of time. You know, when you stop and think about it, look at the historical houses. How many years of that's been in the wall, man. That's good. And now with this new spec mix, you know, it should last a lot longer. So, but you know what? If you get about 25 years out of mortar, you know, because some of the schools we've had to tuck point those too. So, not necessarily. No, coarser because you got a bigger pebble to help hold it together. So no. I'm a strong believer of using that spec mix now. For years I used we had a trailer full. We'd go get the sand, and then we'd you know, use a 5-gallon bucket. We mixed ours in 5-gallon buckets because we used so much. But we go 3 parts of sand in a mixer, and then you have to measure out your mortar, and then mix that, and then we spike it with Portland, and that helps harden it a little more. Portland helps harden it a little bit more.
I asked what is Portland rather than regular cement? Is that
Yeah.
a fair
Yeah.
question?
Yep, well, you got to use the regular cement, the masonry cement first, but I usually spike it with it's just pure cement. It's a harder cement. It's called Portland. So, and I just spike it. I don't do it anymore because of the spec mix, but this was the old way, so that we did. So, but I'm a firm believer of that spec mix now. It takes all the guessing out of everything. So any other questions?
I have a question on, is there a process or are there steps that a person should do when looking at the outside of your house to determine if it is in need of current tuck pointing? And is it common that the entire house would need it, or would maybe just one side? Like, is it the north side, the windy side, or the sunny side, or where does it often need to be done first?
Again, good questions there. I'll answer the first one. First step we do is when you call us, we'll come and look the house over and advise you on it, what needs to be repaired and what don't need to be repaired. And we've come across many that just need some minor repair, and then we've had some that need a total tuck pointing job. It kind of depends on the number of years the house, the aging of the house, how old the house is, how much it's going to need. And to your other question, if I got it right, is the one side worse than the other? Sometimes it usually is. It just kind of depends on the elements of the weather and everything too. So what we do is we'll come and check it over, evaluate everything, let you know. And if it just needs a partial tuck point job, we can do that. Of course, now if you do a partial tuck point job, trying to match the old mortar on a partial tuck point is a lot tougher. You can't match it. So you'll definitely see the old and the new on the tuck point. So I don't know of any way to make it match unless you do a total tuck point. But we don't want to do a total tuck point because then you got the cost involved in it, and all those factors. So that answer that for you? Any other thing? No. Go ahead.
Okay, this is related to health issues. So if you have mortar that's 120 years old that's crumbling to a fine silt, and then you go to re-tuck point or you just try to clean up some of that old silt, do you guys wear masks? And
Yeah.
do homeowners, I don't know that there's anything out there telling homeowners if you're trying to clean all that mortar off your floor, wear a mask because you end up breathing it. So are there health issues that you guys endure as a result of accidentally breathing this stuff? Or what do I need to expect as a homeowner?
Another good question, and that is the answer to your question is yes. We didn't realize it, years ago, but that's why they don't have silica sand anymore. There is health issues with the sand and stuff, so you should, and the dust and the cement and everything, you should wear a mask. We wear a mask. If we're sawing or anything, we have air-fed hoods that we use, and we don't breathe any of it in. But as far as homeowners now, definitely wear a good mask. Don't buy something that's real cheap if you're going to do this. Your health is worth a lot more than trying to save a few bucks on a good mask. So I would definitely wear a good one. So, Laura.
I'm getting a good workout.
So, to Diane's question, did they use silica 100 years ago?
Good question. I don't really know, Laura. I'm not sure, but I know that's why they're making us on these buildings now. OSHA has come down with the regulation, and they just acted it last year. We got to contain all the dust now. How we did yours, we didn't have to. Now we have to. So there's just about 0 dust particles going through the air. So they enacted that. So we're scrambling now, and that's why my competitor that come over and talked to me, I talked to him on this dust containment. And it's very expensive. It adds about 30% more onto a tuck point job. But I'll touch briefly on this with OSHA. They enacted this law that we contain all this dust, and it's not with just us. It's with anybody that deals with cement. The guys out on the interstate highway, they got to contain that dust too. Sawing, how they saw, and you can see all this dust all over. They're supposed to be containing that too. For example, another situation too, out on the interstate, that big milling machine you've seen, and they dump the slurry over into the ditch. They can't do that anymore either. On all our job sites now, we go the electricians, when they're drilling a hole into the concrete, it's got to be contained. It's got to have a vacuum on it to contain it because of the dust. So it's tough. It adds on to construction costs and everything. But back to your question, though, I would definitely recommend on getting a very good mask and then protect the eyes too when you do that. So not to scare anybody, but I would definitely do that and then try to contain your dust. Put shrouds around, plastic up. And I've done that for years, put plastic around, if I'm cutting out or sandblasting, we usually plastic it off. But definitely wear some safety mask of some sort and goggles. And along with, I just protect my whole body. Wear long sleeves if you can. You don't want that in the skin. And for so many years, I've abused it too, had all that masonry on me too. So hopefully I'll be around for another 100 years, so we'll see. So.
Is there one last question anybody has? No?
Anything else?
Well, Jean, thank you very much. It was very helpful.
My pleasure. My pleasure. So